There we go. Daniel and John, please share your video. We would love to hear from all three of you. Very excited to have these three panelists who all have a strong background in health tech investing and can speak to this topic from varying viewpoints. So today we have Jay Whitehead, Chairman and CTO of Reentry Centers, as well as CEO of League Network and My Practice Cares. Dr. John Lee Allen, Managing Partner of Rise Asset Management, and Danielle D'Agostero, Principal Partner of WV Ventures. We'd like to get started with a brief introduction of each of the panelists and the firms you represent, as well as a bit about what you look for when making an investment in health tech. If you could get us started, John, we would love to hear from you. How about a little bit more about Rise?
Sure. No, thank you, Anita, and great to join you all. I'm in Europe, so I'm actually in London. So managing partner at Rise Asset Management. We're a venture capital investor. With a spirit of getting to the future first. You're in healthcare. My background's as a surgeon, engineering. I've spent a bit of time as a research neuroscientist, and then later in the technology entrepreneur space. So on Rise, we invest and we run investment programs, because we're particularly focused on supporting the adoption, within health tech. So our focus is to help founders go further, and we're really looking for kind of proven science and technology that we can translate into real world solutions at a global scale. So we've done this as the investor partner with the largest health tech accelerator in Europe, and we're currently running a program now with Novartis, Medtronic, and the NHS, to accelerate the clinical validation and the distribution of real-world solutions within healthcare. So we invest up to 5 million, and we create value by supporting often very early stage companies, to achieve their first million in revenue. So that's sort of how we think about it. And this approach is really based on the two big challenges we see in health tech. So one is around validation. Validating the technology can deliver immediate value, and overcoming that perpetual challenge of distribution. And happy to talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, that's me, and delighted to join Danielle and Jay.
Absolutely, thank you so much for that. Danielle, would you give a little bit of background on yourself, WV Ventures, and what you look for when making an investment?
Yeah, definitely. So I joined WVV a little over 1.5 years ago. Prior to that, I spent 7 years building an accelerator called Alchemist, where we focused on early stage B2B startups. So building that from the ground up, working with over 400 startups in various B2B industries, definitely built up a pattern recognition for what it takes to build successful businesses, or at least, like to think so. And so moving into a pure venture capital role at WVV, we're a little unique. So we're not purely focused, although we do want the financial returns. What we look for in a startup is whether there's strategic value to any of our corporate LPs. One of them being Advocate Aurora Health, which is the 6th largest healthcare provider in the US. They recently actually merged with another health system called Atrium, based on the East Coast. And so now building a much larger health system at that. And so what we do is we invest in early stage companies, usually seed, Series B, or seed, Series A. And we invest up to 4 million through initial investment, and pro rata into these companies that our LP may be interested in working with either now or in the future. So we're looking to actually invest in companies that have a strategic alignment to the LP. And within healthcare, that's particularly valuable if, as a VC, we can bring those corporate relationships to the startup, which may otherwise be hard for them to do, especially within a health system, and finding the right person internally. So we do a little bit of that digging as part of our diligence process, to really understand where this startup fits within this health system. And of course, so we take it kind of as a customer feedback perspective, understanding that the health system may be a little too far, or that the startup may be a little too early to work with a company right off the bat, but at least we know where we can help guide them in the right direction as they go through their journey, making those connections along the way. And so that's where we like to add value, and we see it beneficial for kind of all parties.
That's awesome, Danielle. Thank you for that. Jay, could you give us a little bit of background on how you invest in health tech, and a little bit of background on your organizations as well?
Hello again, Anita. Jay Whitehead here. 18 startups, 6 exits. I've raised about $400 billion. Two of the 6 exits were in healthcare, specifically in fintech, healthcare fintech. I went to UCLA, Harvard Business School. My first tech boss was Steve Jobs back in 1983. He's an asshole, by the way. I have three personas for this panel, 2 in VC and 1 as an entrepreneur. Yes, I did say asshole. VC1 persona is I'm an advisor to Revere partners in healthcare and dental care specifically, especially payments and fintech. You can look up reverepartners.com. We're doing a pretty bang up job in the dental space. VC2 persona is I'm a partner at UCLA Ventures, and unlike my alma mater's great track record in sports and academics, UCLA Ventures is perhaps the least successful venture capital firm of all time. And so persona 3 is my day job. I'm chairman and chief technology officer of investor-backed reentrycenters.com and Kiwi Tech client since 2016. Reentry Centers is a vertically integrated social services and technology impact company and an online bank serving people re-entering society from prison. And we've raised about $5 million to date on a total raise of about $50 million. Back to you, Anita.
Thank you, Jay. As we all know, health tech has undergone a huge transformation over the last 2 or 3 years, with the advent of COVID and, a lot of things having to be done remotely. New digital solutions have been released. Some solutions, such as telemedicine, have gotten an unexpected boost. And there's just a lot of new ways of investing and new types of startups in the space. In the first half of 2022, Startup Health tracked $16 billion in global health innovation funding, which was a 63% increase even over first half of 2020, and more than was raised in all of 2019. Could you share your experience with the growth of health tech investment in your business and portfolio? And if you could share an example of such an investment that's shown this type of growth, that would be helpful. Back to you, John.
Sure. So I think first of all, this is a great thing for health tech. The increase, the increased interest within the sector, and I think over in Europe, what we're seeing is not just the total amount, but the relative amount. So traditionally fintech has kind of attracted the most in terms of investment, and recently there was a bit of a switch towards health tech. So that's been kind of very interesting to see. I think it's for us, what we kind of want to see is ultimately why we're doing this. A lot of the promise of digital is around improving access, reducing the cost of care, and that's why for us digital therapeutics is something we're particularly interested in. So I can share a little bit about that if you like, but effectively. This is a company's called Otto Health. It's a digital therapeutic for tinnitus. Kind of a similar sort of kind of go-to-market strategy as some of the sleep apps that we know very well, kind of Headspace and Calm. And I think what we particularly liked about it was, kind of the change in regulation, or kind of the market movements that we're seeing in Europe. So in the UK, we're seeing, first line, recommendations by NICE for, digital cognitive behavioral therapy. So it could be delivered through this app. And then, reimbursement, particularly in Germany, through insurers. So these were kind of the two kind of market moves that we've seen, in the last year or so, which has been, a good thing for health tech, in general.
Okay, awesome, John. Yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit more about those investments a little later. Let me go to Jay and see if Jay, could you sort of follow on with that in terms of investments that you've made and the growth you've seen in this sector over the last couple of years?
In 2020 and 2019, startups are now fundable. And we've seen lots of activity in 5 segments. So I'll handle them all in order. Number 1, payments. Lots of activity in payments across for dental, medical, all sorts of healthcare payments innovations. It's as much money as gets spent in healthcare, it's hard to pay.
Jay, I think Jay's screen froze. So maybe what we can do is go to Danielle to answer that question, and then we'll come back to Jay.
Yeah, no problem. I liked where Jay was going with it. We're definitely seeing across the board all aspects of healthcare getting technology applied, which I think is a big testament to the new, type of person that's going into healthcare. Someone who is a little more tech savvy, maybe, or someone who's just more apt to using technology versus the old way where it was just like, no way, we like our pen and paper, that's what we trust. And it's interesting to see. So for me, coming from a very B2B background, going into healthcare, you see how antiquated it is, and how hard it is to apply some of these basic technologies into healthcare. And so over the last couple of years, because of the pandemic, which, this is one of the pros that have come out of this, is everyone realized that you cannot scale with people alone. When there's no people, you have to turn to technology. And we've had these technologies around for years. So they've been validated, they can scale. But the downside is all these technologies that we've seen out in the world haven't really tried to adapt it to healthcare because it's so hard. Each a department within healthcare they're all different businesses within kind of this large conglomerate model, all within the same building in some cases. So you have different leaders, different thoughts, different ways of doing things, and so technology startups have just kind of shied away from healthcare. But now we have startups who maybe have a healthcare background and understand how to speak that language, get things into the door. And build a product specifically for healthcare. And that's why all of a sudden now we're seeing basic, Zoom or telemedicine being applied. We're seeing chat being applied, right? We're seeing automation on the back end. And there's a lot of things being built on top of the EHRs and EMRs that hospitals use. And so it's an exciting time to be in healthcare over the last couple of years. A testament to the numbers. I think everyone started to care more about the healthcare system and realized just how bad it was. And so when venture capital all looked at healthcare, they're like, this is a huge problem. Where are all these companies? We need to fund them. And that's where you see all these big numbers coming into. So it's great. There's a lot of companies with innovation, and by innovation, it may not seem innovative to people who've been in tech for a long time, but to the healthcare system, this is advanced stuff that they're applying here. So overall, very exciting.
Thank you, Danielle. And did you have a specific investment that you wanted to talk about as well?
I mean, yeah, I guess we do not consider ourselves to be a healthcare only fund because we have 4 different LPs. But because of the last 2 years, we've actually made a significant amount of investments in our small portfolio within healthcare. One of them that we're excited by is something called Blueberry Pediatrics. So they have created kind of a take-home kit for new parents, and they're seeing tremendous scale. And for first-time parents, you know, you may or may not worry about everything that happens to your baby at all times. But a lot of the issues that tend to happen, or the questions that come up, tend to be on nights and weekends when your pediatrician may not be available. So having a mobile app, having someone on the other end to kind of relieve your fears, and they've seen tremendous growth and scaling a lot within, every time we talk to them, it's just more and more. So, and healthcare systems are seeing that as a way to get higher consumer satisfaction scores, right? If they're able to still provide care without really providing care, that's the ultimate goal.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Danielle. Jay, we're going to come back to you because we lost you a little bit earlier. I hope that wasn't our Wi-Fi issue, Jay.
I am in the Kiwi Tech office, and it was.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Life happens. Five segments, Anita. 1, payments. 2, buy now, pay later, or in healthcare we say care now, pay later. Insurance technology or InsurTech, very important. Alternative care funding. And new ways to fund practices. And then 5, diagnostic and preventative testing. All 5 areas are right. I'll relate that I've had recent personal experience with the great liquid cancer biopsy company, Galleri, that was launched in 2021 and was recently acquired by Illumina for $8 billion. But we've got portfolio companies, Walnut, Curement, a company called Wisdom doing lending to DSOs or dental service organizations, all very promising portfolio companies. And the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see billions in seed and Series A and Series B funding for these companies. And
oh no, and he's answering our next question. Sorry about that. You're getting a little bit into our next question, so please go ahead. The next question was really around specific trends in health tech, and what you look to invest in going future. Obviously, over the pandemic, a lot of digital transformation has happened, but there's some specific areas I think that everyone's kind of focused on. So would love to get your take on that, Jay.
Dentists, particularly hard hit during the pandemic. Dental care was the only type of healthcare not considered essential during the pandemic. Liquor stores were essential, Anita, but not dentists. So I can see that, but yeah. This caused 76% of dental practices shut down for 3 months or more during the pandemic. As a result, dentists suffered the most of all healthcare providers, and that accelerated a process called the dental service organization model, which is practices grouping together in what are called DSOs, where they get some shared economies. And that got a huge acceleration during COVID, lots of investment, almost $1 billion worth of investment in DSOs. That's now an industry now, by the way. Look it up. Dykema DSO, DYKEMA DSO.com is the largest conference in that business. They had 2,500 people at the conference. I mean, it's a huge business. So hundreds of millions will be invested in dental practices and dental practice management technologies as a result. That's one big thing I'll call out, Anita.
Very interesting perspective. Thank you. John, would you like to give sort of your futuristic look on what is the next big trend as far as what you're tracking in health tech?
Sure. So I think, just kind of coming off the back of Jay's point, Yeah, I kind of see, dentistry, one of those areas that kind of have a bit more of a consumer trend, kind of particularly kind of the orthodontics and, that sort of stuff, and, teeth whitening, etc. And yeah, no jokes about European dentistry. I'll quickly move on. But yeah, so for us, it's really around the consumerization, of healthcare. So we've talked a bit about Otto, which is kind of that digital therapeutic, in that case for tinnitus. But you've seen really encouraging moves. There's another company called Quick Genius, again around smoking cessation, but more sort of on that consumer side in terms of headspace, calm. And then we're seeing also hardware plays. I'm sure everyone has been exposed to the Oura Ring and what it's doing for sleep and sleep scoring and all that conversation that's been going on. So consumerization is definitely a theme. And then I think Danielle makes a really good point around kind of in terms of like the behavior and some of the people within healthcare. For myself, I actually got into healthcare venture capital through clinical entrepreneurship. So that was very much in terms of research, trying to improve things at a system level. And actually that's the other aspect that we liked about Otto. One was the changes in the market, but the other side was the founder market fit. So the founder is actually a clinician who'd been training in the kind of the military side. So a lot of exposure to noise damage, tinnitus, and had a really good feel for, I guess, the appetite, not just patients, but of clinicians, to kind of actually think about digital recommendation and digital prescription, and that sort of thing. So that's a group that we work really closely with in the UK. We've got the NHS. We've got 1.5 million people workforce, and there is an entrepreneurship program. Several really, but there's one focus really for clinical entrepreneurs, and part of that is upskilling and sort of providing that exposure within the workforce, but also very useful in terms of understanding kind of digital literacy and the appetite to use some of these products. And that's why I kind of talk a little bit about products that can deliver immediate value are going to be much easier to kind of pilot and eventually kind of scale within when we're thinking about providers particularly.
Thank you, John. And I would have to agree that where there's also been sort of an increase in the gig economy. So people are taking control of their own lives much more through this pandemic. People are taking control of their health a bit more. I've actually, one of my friends is a pilot for the military and wears the Oura Ring. So I was learning more about that. And I think electronic health record solutions, so digital transformations where they're putting that back in the hands of consumers. That's, I think, what you're talking about, right? People are more inclined to pick up the phone and have a call with the doctor. So very interesting take on that. Thank you for that. I hadn't thought about it like that before, but that's very nice. Danielle, could you give us a little bit in terms of what you think are specific trends, especially given the corporate client, people that you're working with and what they're looking in terms of what they want to invest in?
Yeah, definitely. Just to follow up on John's point, I kind of see healthcare as this multi-sided marketplace, if you will, right? You have the consumers, you have the practitioners, and then you have healthcare as the org, and all parts are in need of innovation, technology, and so there's a lot of opportunity for startups to tap into all of these things. The reality is any efficiencies we build on top of this are going to still be inefficient because they're built on inefficient processes. But with that said, some trends that we're seeing on a few different sides, I still think automation is key for all of these pieces. So technology is going to be helpful. We're seeing the rise of AI. AI is a big component of our fund. And I know people like to throw around that word, but we do believe that in order for AI to really work, you need some robust data sets in order to train the AI and actually learn the right things. That brings the question of bias, but we need to start somewhere. We're a big component or a big piece of advocate strategy is also care outside of the hospital. So care in the home. How can we support patients, again, providing that care without them having to travel long distances or come into the hospital? Patients they can get sicker in the hospital, for different reasons. So is there a way that we can send people to them, or have, or use remote patient monitoring mechanisms to, collect data that the doctor can then review without seeing the patient face to face? Or maybe it's over like a telemedicine call, right? And we've seen that work over the last few years. And I think that will only get better and more sophisticated as consumers continue to use these mechanisms as part of their daily life. And, I'm wearing a smartwatch to track my steps and things. Some people wear sleep rings. Some people are wearing digital diabetes, kind of medication monitoring pads. Like, we're in this new age now where people who want, or, who care about their health are going to take the steps to do what they can to make it easier to kind of track and get the insights. So lots of interesting things there. And from the corporate perspective, engaging consumers where they are and growing that base, even if it's not within a 5-mile radius, is really important to advocate.
Awesome. And we're talking about these trends. I'm also wondering, and we got some questions from our audience also, Danielle, that are asking about sort of healthcare centers and, the relationship with data centers. Is that a growing thing? And also, what is your interest in non-US markets?
Yeah, so we're a mostly US based fund. But we do have, we have looked outside of the US. I would say the biggest, and this is what I would tell any international company looking to get investment into the US, you need to have a story for US customer growth. For a lot of US VCs, they want to see that whatever you've been doing in your own geography translates into the US. And that's honestly a function of them just being the most valuable or most helpful to you. To one of the questions, the India market, unfortunately, none of our team has expertise in that market. So even if we wanted to make an investment, it probably wouldn't be the best fit for you other than just capital, which is not what a lot of VCs like to do. They actually like to provide, feedback and insights.
Perfect. And Jay, another question from the audience we have, which is, what has changed to increase the interest in diagnostic and preventative testing? The old thinking was more diagnostic testing meant more procedures or prescriptions, drugs and other expenses.
There are at least 100 tests out there, Anita, that you can actually specify. Go to a consumer test center in your neighborhood, get a blood drawn, and they can do the test. For example, the Galleri test tests now for 50 types of cancer in one test. 50 indicators of, it's a liquid, called liquid biopsy. Test for 50 types of cancer in one test. You go, you get your 2 vials of blood drawn, you give it back to the clinic. They send it in, and in 6 days, you've got an indication of whether you've got one of these 50 types of cancer in your bloodstream. You could never do that before. It's remarkable. You can do the same thing with prostate cancer. You can do the same thing with breast cancer. You can do the same thing with a bunch of different conditions, liver diseases, kidney functions, all sorts of stuff. And that was never available before. You always had to wait for your doctor to order it from a lab. Now you can do it yourself. So that consumerization of testing is exploding, and that's one of the three areas: fintech, computational chemistry and gene therapies, and diagnostic and preventative testing technologies that will grow exponentially in 2022, 2023 in terms of investments. I know of at least $100 million worth of investments that just have gone into computational chemistry and gene therapies in the last week. So it's growing very, very fast.
That's awesome. And time is flying by at the moment. So I wanted to ask you all for your advice. So our final question center is going to be posed to all three of you, and centers around what advice would you give to an early stage health tech startup? And also a second piece of advice you may have for investors in the audience, given the current environment.
I'll take that one, Anita.
We can start with you, Jay.
Three pieces of advice for entrepreneurs in health tech. One, find big markets, because even if you're going to get some market share. You'll also find that more investors invest in big markets than small ones for that very reason, because the most important factor for any entrepreneur for success is luck. And so big markets make you a little bit luckier. Second, seek minority investment from companies who can be your exit strategy, or investors have links to those companies. But cautionary note, don't give an exit type company the right of first refusal or a ROFR. Please feel free to email me, jay@reentrycenters.com. I'll tell you more about ROFRs and why you want to avoid them. Third thing is, seek accelerators. Danielle ran an accelerator to your business, but I don't just mean an accelerator meaning a place for you to locate your business, but also an accelerator to your business. Let me give you a great example of an accelerator to a business. The athletic equipment company Peloton would not be here if it were not for the buy now, pay later company Affirm, since over 60% of Peloton sales would not have been made had there not been credit available at the point of purchase. So that's an accelerator to a business. Seek those. And then finally, for investors need to network more ferociously than ever, because startups are coming from more places than ever. Incubators, accelerators, and the portfolio companies come from everywhere, not just Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto, California. So, and one final quick note, Anita, and you didn't ask for this, but I'll give you one quick note.
Well, thank you.
If Elon Musk tweets for or against anything or something, run for the hills. Do not invest in anything that Elon Musk either supports or does not support. Period.
We'll get your thoughts on that later, Jay. And John, could you give us some advice as well for founders as well as for investors? Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, sure. So my takeaway, I think, for founders, and investors, when it comes to health tech is to be very open-minded when it comes to your company's value proposition. And that's particularly, I think a lot of the conversation today has been thinking between sort of enterprise and consumer, and particularly the distribution channels, when it comes to healthcare. And I think that's super important because within the UK and Europe, you're moving into different markets and you're moving into different systems. It's perhaps more single payer versus insurer based, obviously the US system as well. And so being very open-minded as to the value that the company brings, I think is very, very important. And as Jay was saying, kind of looking for the right partners. Many successful companies, particularly in the UK, have gained initial traction from having that open-minded approach. Particularly how they can work with pharmaceutical, insurer, medical device, the public, the private and the public provider, because we have a lot of focus on the public provider, in the UK and in other European countries. But all these groups are looking to create value, and develop real-world solutions. And I guess the focus for us right now is around in that kind of lipid monitoring space. So we're working with Novartis, pharma, medical device, Medtronic, and the NHS So we're bringing together sort of validation and distribution to try and accelerate the process. So I think that's one thing that's come, with maturation of the venture, the funding ecosystem, in Europe, where, starting to work harder on this side of the pond. So kind of catching up a little bit, and very keen to work with, our US partners as well. So lots to be excited about. Hand over to Danielle.
Thanks, John. What I like to tell founders, especially ones that are going into healthcare, is it's great to have a big vision, but in the same vein, you need to meet your customers where they are. You can't, if you talk too big a vision from the get-go, you overwhelm the customers. They don't comprehend this. These are baby steps. Everything that we think is very obvious because we've been exposed to it in all other aspects of our lives, we have to remember that within healthcare, they are kind of starting from the beginning. And so build a vision that has kind of baby steps built into it for your product, where you get people just using it, getting it sticky, getting it in their hands. And then once you're ingrained in the workflow, then building it out from there. And I think that's super important, which leads me to the investor perspective. Investors who haven't invested in healthcare before, but have all of a sudden started to, and we've seen that in the last few years, they may be looking at their portfolios and wondering, wow, this startup looks so good at the beginning. What's going on? Why aren't things taking off the way I thought they were? The reality is a healthcare venture is going to look very different than what a traditional tech company is going to look like, just because it's the nature of the beast. And so what I would like to caution investors is that you should really have a good idea of what you're getting into with a portfolio company. And that comes from honestly talking to founders that have sold into healthcare, talking to health systems if you can, getting someone on the inside to really understand how they think. And I think that gives a better perspective as to, if you make a healthcare investment, that's what you're signing up for. Not that it's terrible, but it's just so you're mentally prepared for what it's going to take. And then what I don't want to happen is that investors see like, oh, they're not panning out the way I thought they would, and then they stop investing in healthcare altogether. We need the dollars to go into healthcare in order for change to happen. It just may not. It may not pan out the same way that we're expecting. The returns, we're seeing the hundreds of millions or below, but maybe nothing more than that at the beginning until we really get some momentum going in there, right? Unless you're in biotech, in which case that can be a completely different story. But for a lot of these technology companies, and some of them aren't going to make it, which is typical. But persevere. Stick with it. If you truly believe that your dollars matter in making change in the world, this is probably one of the few areas that you can still have that kind of impact.
Okay, perfect. I am so happy to have had all these thoughts and all the conversations that it's going to spark over the next few months. Thank you for attending and contributing, Danielle, Jay, John. Really a fun time. Thank you.